let's move on now to the Oscars. The Oscars, we don't really cover a lot of entertainment on this show. Frankly, it's just not my bag. I don't really spend a lot of time doing it. I've interviewed different celebrities. Actually, I think, Jonathan, you and I have both actually interviewed our fair share of celebrities. I'll tell you the most infamous one I interviewed. I interviewed Kevin Spacey years ago on the red carpet. His reputation got thrown in the mud very shortly thereafter. But the Oscars.
I hope he was appropriate with you.
I mean, he was there for like an Indian Oscars award show in Tampa Bay. Went out there years ago. So the Oscars, we had some Asian representation. Michelle Yeoh ended up winning an Oscar. We have a more diverse judge base now. They've made some real efforts. After people getting, again, Twitter being another mechanism to say Oscars so white. Hashtag Oscars so white. We had a couple of Indian award winners. We had a documentary film that won an Academy Award, and of course we had the Natu Natu song, which has become kind of a global, almost like the Gangnam Style type of song for the Indian community as it was for the Korean community.
And don't forget Ki Hui Kwan, man, short round from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and Encino Man winning for Best Supporting Actor, first Asian American male ever to win in that category.
And he was a guy whose career was basically derailed for decades, right?
Yeah, and he played the typical Asian stereotypical, roles of the nerd. I mean, that's what he played. He played literally a computer nerd in Encino Man, and after that, he pretty much hasn't acted. And yet, ironically, Brendan Fraser, who also won for Best Actor, and Kwan, they were both in Encino Man, and they win Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor. I think that's incredible.
Yeah, so I mean, this debate rages on whether the Oscars have done enough to diversify their base, because a lot of folks globally were like, hey, this is kind of like a local show. It's like an LA-based, Hollywood-based show. It's not truly a global reflection of the film industry. And so you've seen some changes. You've seen some more foreign films get in the mix. But I think it was interesting seeing the criticism this year with Natu Natu, the RRR song of the year. They had like a dance performance, and again, the song won the Oscar, but they had a bunch of dancers that were not South Asian, not Indian American, and there's only a few hundred of these kind of dancers doing this at a professional level. So there's a lot of criticism being levied to the Oscars, saying, hey, if you want to show true representation, like make an authentic version, even though the dance, as portrayed in the movie, had a really diverse cast.
Are you saying it's time to bring back the hashtag Oscar so white? Is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying that this wasn't like one or two like activists mad. There was like a lot of folks pretty upset about this, which I thought was interesting, because in years past, I think especially in the Indian community, they were just happy, like, wow, we had someone that might be Indian, or we had Ben Kingsley, who I think might be part Indian. He won Gandhi, right? He won an award for Gandhi, and they were like, oh wow, Ben Kingsley. So like Indians were like looking for any kind of representation at all. But to see some mainstream, attention was a big deal. And of course, Deepika Padukone, who's like this big Bollywood actress, she actually introduced the song and dance number. But I'm fascinated to know the dichotomy of young people now speaking out, because previous generations, even when we were youngsters, we were just happy to see anyone that was diverse. Now there's enough diverse faces to say that to actually make a complaint. We still haven't seen the Oscars change that much, but it was interesting to see that kind of debate get out there in the ethos.
Okay, so where do you stand on this debate?
I mean, look,
the Oscar folks have brought on more Indians?
If you're going to want to truly have a global representation, then you need to have the judges reflect society. You need to have the dance teams. You need to have the presenters. And frankly speaking, as someone who we actually try to go cover the Oscars this year, because we knew there were multiple Indian groups up for awards, we applied, and they didn't give us access, which is strange. I mean, we get access to virtually everything. So it shows. I'm like, why isn't we're the largest Indian American network in the United States. We're the largest Asian American network in the United States. Why aren't we allowed on the red carpet to talk to some of these celebrities that obviously our audience wants to hear from? So
you got iced out by the Oscars. It's just unbelievable. That hashtag, bring back Oscars so white. Once again, at the end of the day, it's fascinating. I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but the Oscars, can virtue signal all they want. They want to appoint, quote unquote, all these people of color on this board and that board. But, when it comes down to it, they drop the ball again.
Right. And this goes back, we talked about Michelle Yeoh briefly. Michelle Yeoh, I think you brought up this tweet that NPR, you sent that to me earlier this week, where Michelle Yeoh was, in a tweet, she identifies as Asian. I mean, I don't know what that means in that context. I think it was not a well-written tweet, but it certainly got a backlash because there have been other quote-unquote Asian Americans that have been nominated. It was great that Michelle actually took home the trophy, but it just seems that some of this stuff, I don't think the mainstream media or even a group that's as large as the Oscar committee, the Academy Awards, the folks that do this, maybe they don't realize how diverse the country is, and they're in their own silos. They don't really realize the bubble they're in.
Yeah, I mean, let me just read the tweet here. NPR tweeted, quote, breaking, Michelle Yeoh wins the Oscar for Best Actress, making history as the first person who identifies as Asian to win the award. Twitter added context card later reading, the tweet is factually correct, but missing context to explain wording. Merle Oberon was the first Asian woman nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actress in 1935. Oberon hid her heritage to avoid discrimination. Michelle Yeoh, however, is open about her Asian heritage. So the reason why, hey, fine, that seems like a reasonable explanation. But the reason why this is a big deal is NPR should have known better as a news organization that is obviously leans liberal. I'm not accusing them of, not being fair and accurate in their reporting, but they should know the social climate we're in. And what I mean by that is, when you use words like identifies as for the right or for conservatives or folks who are just sick of being politically correct, that's charged language. That's like the woke, right? It's like, why do you even have to say that? Michelle Yeoh is obviously Asian American. And from my vantage point, it's like NPR, a majority white-run organization, will you at least let the Asian Americans have their moment without interfering with woke language, intended or not. That's my take.
And what's interesting is some people will say she's not Asian American because she's from Malaysia. Again, I don't want to get into the semantics of the whole thing, but it is ridiculous when you see this kind of stuff. And this goes back to like talking about discrimination, where again Michelle Yeoh wins, and Merle Oberon, who I guess was part Indian or Sri Lankan, depending on how you want to connote her, she had hid her identity. This is very commonplace. I mean, there was a story I got introduced to a few years ago, a guy I used to work with at ABC. He did a documentary about a guy named Korla Pundit, who was an African-American guy from, I believe, St. Louis. And then he portrayed himself as Indian and became like a celebrity in the 50s, wearing like a little turban. This is what people had to do back in the day to look different, to be unique, to get noticed. Because maybe if he was just a regular black guy from St. Louis, they would have ignored him. I mean, this is what people have had to do historically, so I'm not surprised.
To make it in Hollywood.
Right.
To make it in white-controlled Hollywood. I get it. But we're in 2023 now, and that's the point, okay? Like, look, it's obviously clear, Michelle Yeoh, you don't need to put the qualifier that she identifies as Asian. That's my point. Obviously, it led to a firestorm on Twitter. When I first read that, I was like, why? Why do we have to go down this road? It goes back to, again, the importance of language, right? Especially when you're in the news media and the language that you use to portray or tell a story. And I think if there is a lesson to be learned here, the still white-controlled media needs to understand that, having, people on staff who, again, know the political climate, the cultural context, again, use specific language that is, my opinion, not politically charged. I'm not saying that, I don't know who this person is who tweeted this. I don't know at the end of the day if it was a male or female. I don't know what's inside a man or a woman's heart and mind. So I'm not saying it was malicious, okay? But the point is, it caused a controversy. It was completely unnecessary, in my opinion, and it took away from the moment.
And I'm curious, actually, I want to get your take on identifies as, because where you're standing from, right? And I know you talk to a lot of folks on the left and the right. I mean, you're dealing with progressives and you're dealing with conservatives. And I'm curious to know where that is in the debate, because I think that's something we haven't really discussed at length on the show, but the
Well,
identifies
it's still
as
there, and it's primarily rooted from the whole trans LGBTQ sexual identity debate, not necessarily even race, but everything's now been blurred, right? The line's been blurred. So, I mean, literally, there are stories out there. We've talked about this of white guys who are getting plastic surgery now to look like Korean K-pop stars, okay? And, you're seeing white women trying to portray themselves as black women, and they're running diversity programs. Okay, so I get it. I mean, there's been a lot of confusion out there, but I think, at this point, we don't need to go down this road, in my opinion. Let's just keep it simple, okay? This qualifying language, in my opinion, is just out of control. I don't know what your thoughts are. I
bring this up only because we really didn't plan to debate this particular topic, but San Francisco, my hometown, just put together a reparations bill, which is not going to actually lead any funding, but they ostensibly are going to give $5 million to people that identify as black. And they said you have to identify, at least through some public records, for like 10 years. And so that leads to a whole host of questions, right? Like, okay, maybe if someone had the foresight to identify as black for 10 years, they could qualify
on their birth certificate.
Yeah, I mean, it just leads to all kinds of semantics and debates, and it's like it's $5 million plus it's like about $97,000 per adult person for like 250 years. Plus they get a home in San Francisco for $1 for your family.
Who was behind this at the end of the day?
That's
what I want to know.
I mean, listen, there's a huge reparations committee. I mean, we're talking like a dozen plus people, respected people. Reverend Dr. Amos Brown, who I saw speak in person just yesterday in San Francisco. I mean, he's an iconic figure in San Francisco. So reputable people are behind this. And I'm not saying that reparations shouldn't be considered. I'm just curious about the language, especially the identifies as, especially now, because that's kind of fairly new vernacular. Right, where we didn't have that.
And again, it's language used by the wokes, it's used by the activists, and it's used by these left-leaning academics at the end of the day. And they're trying to impose it on American culture, and they've done it for decades. And they're now finally being called out, especially through the power of social media. And I think there's an enormous pushback to this. It's just one of those situations where I think I'm always trying to think from the average person, average American, regardless of race, ethnicity, but the average American's lens and viewpoint. And the people I talk to on the ground, even in Seattle, are saying this is ridiculous. This is stuff I don't identify with. Speaking of identifying with, they don't relate at all to this, and it's happening so quickly that people are just trying to catch up to their latest television programs, let alone the language being used. And the reason why is people hate it now because if you don't use it properly in certain contexts, people are afraid of now being canceled. It's this insane cancel culture. So if I don't use this proper language that some woke academic told me to use, I'm politically incorrect? Okay, fine. I guess I'm politically incorrect. I think people are just so tired of the media and academia telling us what language we need to use and essentially how to behave in America.
Yeah, I mean, people do get corrected quite a bit, and I'm fascinated to know where this is going because, I've talked to people that are like Indian American leaders who identify as Indian American. Some people say they're South Asian. Some people say I'm just American. I don't even identify as Indian, right? Like they're flatly of Indian lineage, but no, I'm American. And I mean, anybody can.
The question we need to be asking is, where is this coming from? Who is pushing this language? Where's the source? At the end of the day, it's gonna be majority white folks. It's virtue signaling, dude. If there's anything, I'm not all about this whole white supremacy stuff. And by the way, for the record, I am for reparations as well to a certain degree. Again, reasonable reparations. I don't know what that means. I'm not the expert. I'm not on this committee and board. There have been other groups throughout history that have received reparations. Japanese Americans who have been interned received reparations. I think black Americans absolutely should receive reparations to a certain degree. But this $5 million per person, I mean, this is just ridiculous. It's lunacy.
I think
How
the
do you
challenge
fulfill
is
that practically?
Yeah, I mean, San Francisco